This is World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with your host, Carl Gruber. World Awakenings is a podcast dedicated to opening your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how they play an all-important role in our daily life. So join Carl on this enlightening experience as he interviews metaphysical and spiritual experts to discuss, debate, and delve deeply into the hows and whys of this worldwide awakening.
Hey guys, welcome. You've come to the right place for information and understanding about all things spiritual, enlightening, and metaphysical. The World Awakening is a fast track to enlightenment podcast. Now with 4 years of shows under our belt, this is episode number 116, and I am excited to introduce you in a moment to our special guest for this show. Now first, please take a moment to grab your free copy of my ebook, The 3 Pillars, a simple 3-step process to manifest positive and permanent change in your life, and also get your copy of my ebook follow-up, a full-length book called True Spirituality and the Law of Attraction, a beautiful symbiotic relationship. All you have to do is click the links below in the show notes. Now, let's check in with our featured guest today. That is Crystal Anne Compton, and she is a very popular spiritual teacher, intuitive channel, and founder of the Lightshine Lab, an online community dedicated to spiritual learning and consciousness exploration. Plus, she hosts her own podcast, Life Magnetics. She has served as an intuitive reader for over 2 decades before shifting her focus to teaching, coaching, and speaking. So, welcome, Crystal Anne. I love having you on the show already.
I am so excited to get into all of the spiritual things with you, Carl. Thank you for having me.
Oh, this is great. I love your background. So you definitely got rooted back there with the candles and everything.
Yes.
So, well, this is what you do, but I've been doing a little research on you, and your personal story about being a youngster who spoke to the tree people who lived outside your home in Hawaii, to becoming a fundamentalist street preacher, then leaving your church and coming full circle back to your tree people is incredible. Holy mackerel. Is there a book about your life out yet?
No, there is not a book about my life out yet, but there should be. Yes, I would agree with you. Yeah. Yes.
Wow. Well, tell us about these tree people. I mean, you were a youngster when this happened, and you were living in Lahaina, Hawaii.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I was living in Lahaina, Hawaii. I was probably about 3 years old. This is literally the first memory I have of my life. It's not my mama or my daddy. It's not the ocean. It is these 2 strange looking tree people. And if I can look back at it now as an adult, I would kind of liken them to fawns or the Mr. Tumnus character in the Chronicles of Narnia. Like half of the body was human, and then the lower half was just like animal legs. And they had a really interesting quality to them, and I could pick it up even as a child. And I say even as a child, but the reality is children are really intuitive and sensitive. Mm-hmm. And they're very close to the veil of birth and death. And so they kind of know what's going on. But these 2 tree people, it was a male and a female, just had a different energy to them. I would say they weren't necessarily interested to get to know me. I think I probably bothered them a little bit because I was so eager to sit in my little sunbeam and talk to them, which was completely telepathic, by the way. I wasn't speaking full sentences. It was completely telepathic communication. I got the sense that the male was a little annoyed that I would show up every afternoon when my mom put me down for a nap, and I'd get out of my bed and sit in there in the sunbeam. And we would just have these conversations. They had a very fierce energy to them, which I now know, many, many moons later, is pretty indicative of a nature elemental, kind of a protector of the earth. They're not the same energy as, say, an angel. They're like, are you on our side or are you not on our side? Because if you're not on our side, you're an adversary. And so they're very, very almost a warrior kind of class. There's a whole spectrum of nature elementals. And these ones they were very cool, definitely divine, but they had their own flavor. And I would talk to my parents about it. My dad was born in Hawaii as well. He had a very spiritual side to him and a very destructive one. My mother was wildly psychic herself,
Mm.
raised Catholic, but then left when she was a teenager and was very clairsentient and clairaudient. And so when I went to my parents when I'm a little girl, telling them about these tree people, they didn't disabuse me of the experience because they had had their share of them too. And in fact, my mom in particular was able to give me some resources and some infrastructure like, this is what you do, this is how you do it. If it ever goes this way, this is how you end it. And she just gave me some tools that I could use in the world of spirit. And so I never felt like what I was seeing was wrong or bad or devil, demonic. I never was told that it was just my childish imagination. They validated my experience for me. And because they did, I was able to have more, which I did.
And that's interesting too, because having lived in Hawaii myself for a little while, there's quite the mystical aspect there in the Hawaiian Islands. Hawaiian, what is not Ho'oponopono? That's a type of religious practice.
Huna is the practice.
Huna,
Ho'oponopona is the forgiveness prayer. Yeah.
right, Huna, yeah, that's right. And yes, there's quite a belief and practice in spiritual beings and everything. But your tree people, they almost sound like fairy type of characters.
Yes, I would say so. Yes. I mean, I don't know that they were distinctly fairy, but
Mhm.
they may have been a type of. Because I've experienced fairies too. And they're kind of just, they're a similar maybe home signal or origin signal, but they're just a little different. And in terms of my clairaudience, which is the ability to hear in the world of spirit, they sound a little bit different. There's like a frequency or a resonance with all of the entities that I've ever interacted with. Fairies, and by the way, aquatic beings like dolphins, have this really high kind of a frequency and chatter, like a dee, 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 dee. This is what I hear. With
Yeah.
these tree people, there was kind of this booming pulse, low, slow pulsing kind of a boom. It was just different. So I don't know if they're the same type of being, but I think they are connected in their advocacy for the earth.
Well, this is such a cool subject. In 116 episodes, I don't think I've talked about fairies yet, and
Okay.
tree people. This is really great. But I mentioned this at the beginning here. You, as you got older, you turned to fundamentalist religion. Now, how did that happen from the place you were as a youngster, intuitive, telepathic youngster?
Yeah. So as I'm describing, my youth or my childhood in Hawaii and beautiful living in Lahaina, big banyan tree, it sounds very beautiful. And in some ways it was. But I referred to my dad as a destroyer, and he was. He was a very abusive person. And he was an addict to many different substances, whichever ones he could get his little hands on, he would do it.
Mm.
He wasn't abusive to me and my brother particularly, but he was very abusive to my mom, which is also being abusive to your children. And he didn't like to work. He put us into poverty situations. There was a time when we had moved to the Big Island. We were living in the town of Volcano, Hawaii. I could see the volcano fountaining from my backyard, a few miles away. Like that's how close I was. We didn't have electricity though. We didn't have running water because again, my dad didn't want to work. It was always kind of a intoxicated hellscape. And so I was looking for something more. I didn't know that I was, but I just needed some security, and I needed a foundation of some sort that wasn't shifting sand. And my friend from school invited me to her church. And it was a First Assembly of God, which is a Pentecostal church. And if you know anything about the Pentecostals, honey, they're the snake wranglers. They're the ones that are like falling over. They're the ones speaking in tongues and healing and prophesying. Like it was a very psychic church. I actually felt at home with my abilities in the Pentecostal church, and I could relate to a lot of those evidences. And what really appealed to me was this message that there was a Father in heaven who cared about me and who wanted to take care of me. And I didn't have that with my actual dad. And so that's what helped me to trip and fall into fundamentalist or literalist Christianity. And once I was in, I was what we call sold out and radical for Jesus. I A lot of my gifts and talents began to activate in these years, like 13, 14, 15. I remember going from church to church to church, preaching, speaking, again, a street preacher. I was I was very, very in the flow of the spirit. But what started to hamper things was the regulation and the dogma and the doctrinal oppression, really religious trauma. So there's so many good things about it. And I stayed in religion for, gosh, probably 12 to 15 years. I was a missionary. I was a singer. I was a Bible study teacher. I was what can you do? I did it because I was really into it until something happened. And in that moment, like the veils sort of fell away for me and I saw things as they really were. And I finally left. But at that point, I'm like 26, I'm 27, I'm a grown person. Yeah.
Wow. So you spent most of your youth doing that. And wow, from abusive, well, a tough situation when you were young. Like you said, your dad was more abusive to your mom, but to that. So, and you've come around full circle at this point. I think I did read you were kind of lost for a while before you gained your footing again. What happened during that time?
Yeah. So imagine that your whole perception of self and the world and God is held up by this scaffolding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Precariously perched. And all of a sudden, one day, you don't have it anymore because something happens and you see things differently and you leave that infrastructure. I mean, it's a very lonely and also scary place to be, especially when you're talking about fundamentalist Christianity, where they're always talking about the backslidden Christian or the apostates, the ones that leave. I was afraid to walk away, but I did. And for a few years after leaving religion, I was mad about it. I was angry at Christians, which I then took out on Jesus. I thought, Jesus, why? I mean, I questioned everything about it.
Mm-hmm.
But somewhere in the wandering around in the deserts of all of that, which must have taken, I don't know, 5 years, I started to think about those little tree people again.
Yeah.
And I started to think about the colors I used to see around people, which also had little shapes in them, which I now know are sacred geometry. And I'm like asking myself, what was that? And how come it was so easy for me to see that and also other things? And how come I don't see that now? And how can I start to see it again? And thus began kind of my journey back to finding my innate gifts. And by the way, Edgar Cayce was one of the fundamental players in that arena for me, because Cayce, if you know anything about him, is referred to as the father of holistic medicine, but also the sleeping prophet. He was a channel. He
Mm-hmm.
gave readings to presidents, to all kinds of people, health readings and also spiritual readings. But he started off like I did. He started off in fundamentalist Christianity. He would go to sleep every night with the Bible under his pillow, and he would memorize the whole thing. He diagnosed himself of his own ailment and then prescribed the cure from spirit. So when I found the work of Edgar Cayce, and we kind of had the same background, but here's this beautiful psychic person, I kind of gave myself permission at that point to let that start to emerge again in me. And once you give the permission, once you have the intention, spirit always shows up in my experience and says, let's do it. Let's go.
Yeah, Edgar Cayce, a big influence on so many people in the metaphysical spiritual realm throughout the following century and a half since then. And I've had guests on here also studied with Dolores Cannon,
Yes.
who is intimately hooked up with the Cayce Foundation. And she's no longer with us, but all of her work still follows on. And wow, that is really cool. So all of this, and you came back to starting to remember your tree people and seeing the colors. I've read that you're also known as a psychic and an intuitive. What's the difference?
Probably nothing. I think I think one word stands out to a certain group of people. The other word stands out to another. I think intuition is something that we always have within us. It's a knowing.
Hmm.
Psychic kind of feels to me like the flowing out from that, the abilities that you have and develop because you have this innate knowing. It's the more dynamic or evidential aspect of the intuition. But I mean, we're talking semantics, probably. Probably.
And I won't dwell on this much longer, but just real curious. So you did reconnect with the tree people at some point, and were they still annoyed that you were trying to talk to them?
I never reconnected with those two tree people because by the time I had this awakening, I was in Chicago
Hmm.
and they were very fixed to the geography of Lahaina, Maui, and Hawaii, really. But I have gone on to have encounters with all sorts of different nature elementals. But in addition to that, spirit guides, angels. Also, I've had my share of encounters with negative entities and things of that nature. But yeah,
Well,
I've had.
let's actually pursue that a little bit because, excuse me, I was going to ask that. Now, I know you speak and write quite a bit about connecting with angels, and you've had specific encounters with angels, but also negative entities. How so? Any specific incidences?
Yeah.
I mean, that you care to
Oh yeah.
elaborate on?
Sure, sure. Well, I mean, I think in the beginning when I was having left religion and starting to kind of dip my toes into intuitive development, I did not possess confidence of self, which is critical to have if you're going to develop your intuition. I didn't know who I was as a divine being because, of course, through the arm of Christianity, you're placed in a position that is different than spirit. It is different than God. Like save a wretch like me, right? So everybody kind of in the religion, we're the wretches. We don't
Mm,
perceive ourselves as having inherent divine power, even though Jesus himself said, "You are all gods. Now
yes.
act like it." Jesus said that. So I didn't have the vibration of what I call dominion, knowing my divine self and knowing that I am in control of my own creation. And so, because I was dipping my toe in intuition and psychic abilities, and I didn't have my own vibration of divinity, I was a target. I would say I was a target, which is why, when I went on to teach intuitive arts to people, we always started there. Do you know who you are? Do you know how inherently powerful you are in this dimension? And then you start to bring in, like, how do I become psychic? How do I do this or that? So, because I didn't know that, I was attacked. I
Mm,
was attacked. And one particular time, I found myself, kind of the old hag experience of yore, which is where I'm lying in bed. I was awake. I was in a hypnagogic state. I was experiencing sleep paralysis when a shadow person entered the room, got up on my bed, and laid itself on top of me and started to suffocate me.
ooh,
And it was so on me and down on me, like all I could see was like the eyes of this being, these dark dark eyes. And the quality of this entity, when you say shadow people, you don't really understand the black of the shadow, because when normal spirits are trying to appear to you, the first stages of that materialization is often shadow, but it's normal shadow. A shadow person, which we could have a whole conversation about them. It's different, and their frequency is very, 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 very terrifying. And yeah, so the only thing that got me out of that was saying the name of Jesus Christ. It was all I really knew, right?
mhm,
And
mhm.
there's something about that name. And even though I would say, am I a Christian? Uh, I would say I'm a Christian. I'm not a literalist Christian or an evangelical Christian, but I believe in the power of Jesus Christ. I believe in the power of that name, and nothing has ever worked to cast out a spirit like the name of Jesus. So as soon as I said it, the spirit was gone. Of course, I took notice. But I was probably in a state of fear for quite some time after that because that really messed me up. And I've
Yeah,
gone on to have other shadow people attacks as well, which started to change once I began to identify as the being that I really am.
yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. Well, Jesus wasn't even a Christian. There was
Right.
no Christianity when he was alive. So, um, Wow, amazing story. I would actually prefer to steer towards the light and find out more about what you call dominion. I like that, and love to hear you elaborate a little bit more, because
Sure.
dominion has dominion over the shadow people, just like the name of Jesus Christ. And well, I'll let you take it from there.
Yes. So the idea of dominion is you having dominion over your experience in this incarnation. You have dominion over this. And the truth is that you are the consciousness in control of this whole creation. When a consciousness is in reaction and doesn't know that it's the consciousness, now you're creating a bunch of chaos. But once you understand and run the energy of who it is that you truly are as a soul, that's dominion. And it's not a concept, it's not an idea, it is something you have to embody. It is a vibration that you hold. And when you click into your own dominion, when you're running your own dominion, the entire world of spirit, this whole diverse ecosystem made up of angels and demons and everything in between, they can recognize your dominion. They're like, oh, this girl knows who she is. So as soon as I got this concept and trained myself to run it as often as possible, the incidence of any kind of spirit entering my house, entering my bedroom, entering my dreams diminished greatly. Now, all these years later, I mean, it's just the errant spirit who knocks into my house and says, excuse me, I meant to go to this house or whatever. So it just really doesn't happen anymore. But dominion is knowing who it is that you truly are and living in the vibration of that. This is nothing new, right? This is what all of the great sages have told us about ourselves, but most of us don't live in this way.
I am a huge student of the Modern Spiritual Guide, A Course in Miracles.
Yes.
I've studied it on a daily basis for, probably 17 years now. And I believe that it has given me dominion over that. And I feel very safe, 99.9% of the time. And when I forget, I turn to my higher self, and it works. And anything that you can do that takes you to the light and the truth of, like you said, the divine power that we were born with, and remember it. Wow, there's nothing greater than that.
Absolutely. And it's not something you have to do, like a bunch of psychic protection rituals.
Right.
It is something that you are. I have a really good friend in Hawaii. She's a kahu, she's a priestess, and she's called upon to, clear stadiums or buildings or this or that. And of course, she brings in her tools and she does this, but truly, and she will say, all I have to do is fill up to saturation point with this energy that we're talking about and go and stand in the middle of the stadium for a while. And everything adjusts and arranges itself around that prime frequency. And life is about figuring out how to get into that prime frequency. That prime frequency is love. That's what it is. And all levels of love. Like the Bible actually says that the light shines into the darkness. The light is love. And the darkness doesn't know how to comprehend it. And furthermore, is antagonized by it because it doesn't understand it. So it's about figuring out in your own life, how can I be the energy of that? And then again, spirit arranges itself around you accordingly.
Everything is energy.
Yes. Yes.
Well, hopefully we'll talk in a little bit about the law of attraction, but everybody, I guess each of us has some form of a spiritual gift. How can a person develop their own spiritual gifts?
Well, intention is very important. I find working with some of the students that I've worked with that they want to develop their gifts, but they're afraid of what will happen when they do. And so you have to clear out the fear first, which again brings us back to foundational stuff, which is dominion, knowing who you are. So you have to spend time in study, in maybe classes, in research fellowship to embody this I am that you are, because that's your power position. From there, it is setting an intention to open your psychic abilities and have spirit show you what these are and to kind of follow the evidences that spirit gives. But the fastest way, the fastest way to open up your abilities is to do something I call vibration modification, which is to say, to intentionally put yourself into immersive high vibration experiences. This changes from one person to the other. Like my high vibe experience isn't going to be your high vibe. You're going to run a marathon. You're going to be so high vibe. I'm going to be like, this is hell. Okay. This is the worst. So you got to figure out for yourself, what are your high vibe experiences, and then put yourself in them. And one of the best ways to start to open up all of your senses is to get out into nature.
Mm-hmm.
Just put yourself out into nature, put yourself into that sunbeam, or dive into that ocean or into that water with that intention, and allow these faculties to open up. And then of course we have to talk about meditation, which nobody likes to talk about because it's not sexy. It's not as sexy as talking to angels. What do I got to sit here and I got to think, or I got to not think for 20 minutes or a half an hour? How do I not think? And so people delude themselves into thinking they can't meditate, or that meditation is hard. But I promise you, if you give yourself over to the practice of meditation, there will come a time where you tip over from the struggle of it all into what I call the sweet spot, the really beautiful place of presence, as if you sat down right next to source energy and you're just resonating with it. That, when you do that, Carl, that's everything. Because when we are proximate to source energy in this way, we give ourselves the opportunity to be changed by source energy. Because source energy is the dominant frequency. You don't get any higher or stronger than source energy. And when we put our little incarnation selves next to source energy on the couch of life, we expose ourselves to a dose of this prime divine energy. And that light knows how to shift us around and change us. And the light that God shines on us opens up the lights within us, which are our psychic abilities. So meditation, you got to get into it.
I think one of the reasons so many people in the modern world have trouble meditating is very, very, very few people have a quiet moment to themselves. And when they do, they put earbuds in. They're either listening to some music or on the phone. I mean, I will be running out in nature in a beautiful park, like on a beautiful spring morning like today, and somebody come walking by in beautiful nature, and they got the two white sticks in their ears, and they're on the phone talking. And I go, wait, look at the bird over there. Look at those flowers. They don't see it. And when they finally have a few minutes to, with nothing in their ears, the cacophony of music, and music's great, but if it's constantly going, or talking, they don't know what to do. I think most people are afraid to listen to their own thoughts because they don't know what else. I've never done this before. You mean I can listen to my own thoughts?
I know. And I'm not my thoughts? Wait, if I have the ability to hear my thoughts, that must mean I'm some kind of being that is standing in the presence of I'm not the thoughts. Then who am I? Like, that's a huge question. That's what we came here to figure out in this life. And that kind of epiphany and work is daunting to a lot of people. But you got to do it. You really have to do it. And you have to take on the lifelong task of, you mentioned thoughts, and this is so important, noticing what you're thinking. Because every thought you're thinking is connected to something you're probably also feeling. And as Neville Goddard told us, feeling is the secret. Okay, so what you're feeling, you're creating, period. But if you're never paying attention to what you're thinking and you're feeling, how do you know what you're creating for tomorrow? And also those thoughts are tied to patterns inside of us, unforgiveness, offenses, concepts of self that are erroneous, concepts of others that are erroneous. All of these patterns inside of us generate thoughts that we're thinking right now. And if we're not listening to the thoughts, how can we ever get to the pattern to start to clear them or heal them? That is the work of the life.
And I think the other important thing about is when you're listening to your thoughts, many people, and I've discussed this with many other guests, with people like Coach, they don't realize they have the power to direct their thoughts. They think they're a ship without a rudder and just like, the wave's knocking them around anyway. But no, you have a choice. This is one of the key teachings of A Course in Miracles, that in any moment you have two choices. You can either choose to think with your higher self, or you can choose to think with the ego. And yeah, so folks, you have a lot of power. You just take a hold of it. You can do it.
Yes, I think it was Genghis Khan. What a reference. But Genghis Khan said something like, "My body is an animal. It does my bidding. I will stand in this frozen river for as long as my consciousness wills it to be, and my body is an animal, it will do it." Now, that's a crude way of kind of illustrating the point you're talking about. Our thoughts are just generated aspects of these patterns, but we are in control of those thoughts. It is good to notice them, follow the thread of them, do the work of healing, but you can also change them. Change the way that you're thinking. Have a set of affirmations at the ready that you can substitute some of your thoughts with, your negative thoughts and thinking with, so that you can start changing the way that you feel. Now, the Bible says to think on these things that are lovely, that are beautiful, that are of good report. Like, you've got to pay attention to how you're thinking. It makes all the difference.
Yeah, very much so. I would like to turn to the law of attraction. I know you talk about it and teach about it. I'm a certified law of attraction life coach. I wrote a book about it, True Spirituality and the Law of Attraction. What, well, of course, the easiest definition is like attracts like. That which we think and dwell upon is more sent to us. Everything is energy. So what aspect of the law of attraction do you think that most people don't understand or misuse?
Well, feeling. Okay, because feeling is, I think feeling is another way to say your vibration. Your vibration is what emits your frequency, just to get down into terminology. It's the frequency that dictates what the universe returns unto you according to your feeling of yourself. So if you're walking around the planet angry, fearful, unhappy, that feeling, not your thinking. You can have as many vision boards as you want, but if you feel yourself to be as without what you want, you will only ever have what you do not have. So really understanding that feeling is connected to manifestation, that it's like a two-part system. And also, I keep referring to Neville. I love Neville. Neville had a lecture entitled Order, Then Wait, which is like, put in your universal order, which is my cheeseburger of manifestation that I really want to eat. It's so delicious. I give it to the waiter, and then I sit here and I wait for it. But as I wait, I'm not worried about the burger. I'm not flagging down the waiter and asking, "Hey, are you sure they're making my burger? Is it going to be medium rare?" I'm not worried about when it's going to come and how it's going to taste. Instead, I'm in a relaxed disposition. I'm sitting there with my husband. Maybe I'm having a cocktail. We're having an appetizer. I'm asking about his day. It's a lovely moment. It's how we exist in between the order and the manifestation, because a lot of us call back our blessings. A lot of us put that order out and then we snatch it right back. We change it, or we just destroy it. Never give it a chance.
And I'm really glad that you pointed out the aspect of feeling with the law of attraction. The real understanding is that the universe responds to not necessarily your words, but to what you're projecting from your heart. Because you can be saying one thing in your mind, but your real self here in your heart center is projecting, like say, "Oh, I really want to, have a happy marriage and everything," but your heart is projecting, "So I don't ever want to be married," or something like that,
Right.
and so yeah, you have to pay attention to what you really want coming from here. That's what the universe responds to. That's what the law of attraction responds to.
Yes, it responds to that. There's a great scripture. I hope I'm not inundating you with some of this, but
No,
some
great.
of these scriptures are fire words. They're manifesting words. But there's a scripture in which Jesus says, "To him that hath, more is given. To him that have not, more is taken away." And I always read that when I was sitting in my pew, the First Assembly of God Church, and I thought, well, that's rude. You're going to take away what the guy who doesn't have anything has? But it's not about that. It's about your vibration of I have. I am already that. If you can run the vibration of being what you want to be tomorrow, today, more will be given to you. That's the key. But if you're standing in the energy of I don't have it, I wish I could have it, more will be taken away. You will just perpetually be creating from lack. That is an eternal principle that I think kind of says it all.
Well, thank you for explaining that, because that's absolutely beautiful. If you can understand that, wow. And that kind of goes in with the sentence. Well, actually, I saw one of your videos recently where you speak about how is it possible to how it is possible to manifest anything you want. And I guess you just kind of explained how you
Mhm.
do.
Yes. That's really it. But I'm not trying to say that it's necessarily easy to run the energy of I am already that. It really does take skill and focus, intentionality in order to do it. But when you can do it, you can manifest anything, and you can manifest very, very quickly as well.
Awesome. Well, we are speaking with Crystal Anne Compton, just an amazing, amazing lady with multiple intuitive and psychic talents. And
Thank you.
oh my gosh, I just, wow, maybe we should, can this be a 4 hour show?
I wouldn't mind.
But, I did see another thing too, in doing research on you. I saw a topic on your bio that I found interesting, and it says maybe it would be interesting to talk about, hey, what happens when we die? This is obviously a big topic. So, what does happen when we die, and how do you know?
Right. Okay. Fair. I have not died in this life at this time. But as soon as I started investigating and reading, I read a lot of spiritualist material, material out of the psychical research, the material generated by mediums who are in contact with the other side. And I also, when I started to channel and connect with higher powers, I asked these questions specifically. And also, when my own mother died, and she and I had a pact, whoever goes first has got to come back and give us some of this intel. And so
Okay.
I had encounters with my mother. And so, from what I understand, when we die, we find ourselves, of course, out of body in a dimension that is a match for however we were feeling upon the time of death. And
Mm-hmm.
that's just not like, oh, I was pissed off or I was in pain. No, like the whole of who you are, what your vibration was at the time of your death, is going to be mirrored in the dimension you find yourself in. So when you hear about these near death experiences of people who find themselves in hell, and you think, oh my God, there's a hell, I would say, there is not a hell. There is just a dimensional correlate to the way that you feel about yourself that you may find yourself in, but it is temporary. You may
That's
also,
what I've heard. It is temporary.
it's
Yeah.
temporary. You can get yourself out of anything. In the fourth dimension, which is actually where you are when you die, it is a thought dimension, a thought form dimension as well. And as soon as you think a thing, it becomes a thing, as opposed to here in the third dimension where we've got time and space. And in the fourth dimension, it's a portal dimension, which I'm not going to go into the whole infrastructure of the fourth dimension because it's a crazy place. But there's a portal there, and we call this the tunnel of light. And no matter who you are, when you die, you will have access to this portal, this tunnel of light. And most of us go through it. Some of us don't, and some of us go on to be ghosties and earthbounds because we're not going through to the light. Others make a different decision for another reason. But once we go through the light, we encounter something called an afterlife review. Actually, this can sometimes happen in the fourth dimension, so don't hold me to it. But at some point, there's going to be an afterlife review, which is a period where we examine in a feeling way, what we experienced in this life outside of judgment, because I'm already cringing thinking of the things I'm going to have to remember doing in my past. I've done some terrible things. I don't, the shame of that, that would be mortifying. It's not like that from all of the accounts. It's more like, oh, from a higher vantage point, I am observing myself and I'm taking notes. Next time I'm going to do it differently here. And also I'm learning the lesson of this thing. After you have this afterlife review, many of us go into what I call this climatization period or tank. It's like the way it looks when I'm looking at it clairvoyantly is just kind of this chamber that some of us enter into for just some peace and restoration. A lot of us have lived lives of severe abuse, some of us, when we die, we have dementia, Alzheimer's, and we need some time to basically climatize to the new dimension we are entering into, to enter into that light body fully. But some of these things have to be healed first. For example, my mom needed some time in that chamber. Once out of that space, if you have to go into it, then you enter into what we call the fifth dimension. This is heaven, but there are many octaves of the fifth dimension. We enter in the lower level, like the first tier, which is infinitely better than anything we can experience in this reality in third dimension. We enter into that, and you've read Michael Newton's books, probably Destiny of Souls, Journey of Souls.
I have not. No.
Oh gosh, he goes into this elaborately about what happens once we're in heaven. A lot of us are sorted by soul groups, soul families, talents, and things of that nature. And we do a lot of things for that period of time before we incarnate back onto the planet. And my question is always, but why though? Why would I want to reincarnate onto the earth? I'm tired, and I think I would like to maybe spend some time in the Pleiades or something a lot better than Earth, because this is hard, you know. But for whatever reason, many of us decide to come back and do it again.
Wow, boy, you just activated like 10 different questions in my mind here. You know, you just mentioned maybe going on to be a Pleiadian, which is a race in a different galaxy. And especially if you look at somebody who is a fundamentalist religion, the concept that angels and ascended masters can be interconnected with races of a different galaxy who may be existing in a different dimension. I mean, it's just mind-blowing. I've had many guests on the show. I've actually interviewed Athela from Sirius B, coming through Christina Hill. I've interviewed the Council of Light, which comes through my mentor, Christy Whitman, and others. I've had Pleiadian on, I forget, the Galea Collective. So it's the concept. I think a lot of people have a hard time. They just think of strictly angels and spirits, but they don't understand that these beings from different dimensions and galaxies who already exist at a higher level are part of the whole picture too.
And many of these are misidentified as angels. A lot of the angels that we have in our mythology and in our experiences are actually high level interdimensionals. And speaking of Edgar Cayce, he referred to the Arcturians and Arcturus as the most technologically advanced in the galaxy. And of course, technologically, I think, and I'm inferring this to be honest, but it's not just technology, it's heart-based, ascension-based technology. And I feel like we have a lot of interdimensionals making themselves known on the planet right now to anybody who's a match to their frequency, because we are going through such a profound shift. And if we're shifting here in the 3D, they're going to be shifting in 6D or 5D or 7D, wherever they're hanging out. Our shift affects everybody in the universe, which is why I think we're having so many visitations right now on the planet.
I think one of the biggest topics on so many of my episodes here is the topic that mankind is at a place in its history of all of time, moving from the 3D to the 5D. And that we're shifting from a carbon-based body to a crystalline. I mean, I don't think it's happening overnight, but we're in an accelerated process of that, like we've never known before.
Yes, and I would say that's true. And I go back to the work of Drunvalo Melchizedek, who kind of talks about these dimensional octaves. And what I mean is, in this dimension, third dimension, you have lower octaves of experience that are maybe more animalistic, like people who are just very base, driven by lust, driven by greed. And then you have the other side of the spectrum with those of us, far be it from me, I'm not saying I'm in these octaves, but those of the most enlightened among us are at such a high vibration and frequency that they're kind of bringing the whole spectrum of us along. And I think so many of us incarnated now to find our way over into this rainbow octave so that we can help be way showers at this critical time, because for the first time in our history, we've got AI. We've got the advent of actual transhumanism. Like, I think it's possible soon to upload my consciousness to a cloud. Like, that's crazy. Like, never before have we had so much possibility in the offing, but that's why we're here, because we got to do it the right way. Otherwise, we're in Blade Runner.
Wow, some deep stuff here. This is really great. Well, Crystal, and I'm going to let you go here in a little bit, but what an incredible conversation with you. Now, I do want to find out about, and I mentioned this in your intro, in your bio, about your Lightshine Lab, and also about your podcast. What is it, Life Magnetics?
Yes, Life Magnetics. I've been doing Life Magnetics for, gosh, I'm so bad with time, a year or 2 years maybe. So anybody can listen to that. I have a YouTube channel. I've got, I think, over 800 videos on metaphysics that you can watch at any time. It just tracks with my interest in my own development. I do have the Lightshine Lab. Now, that used to be way more robust in the heyday of Facebook, but now as so many people are leaving Facebook, it's not as active as it used to be, but it is a place where you can go. There's always somebody going up in the lab, like an intuitive, a healer, an inspirer. They do it for free. So you can bop on in, get a reading. It's really cool. And then there's my website, crystalannecompton.com. Don't forget the E in Anne. I have to tell you though, Carl, for the last almost year, I've been in a space of waiting and preparation because I'm somewhat moving away from the work that I've done before and moving towards something different, a little bit different for me. So everything I do is free right now. I mean, I've got nothing monetized. I'm not selling anything at all. But I am presently rendezvousing with Spirit about a new message coming down. So more on that later. Follow me to find out what that's going to be.
Wow, that is so great. I have a colleague in Perth, Australia, Jennifer Matthews, who's been on this show, and her goal is ascending to the 5D, and she calls those downloads. She's got downloads going from Spirit all the time. So
yes, exactly.
A download.
Wow. Yes.
Wow. So definitely check out her website, crystalannecompton.com. And don't forget that E. I know my mom was an Anne with an E on the end. And so that's important for you, Anns.
Yes, it is. It makes a difference.
With an E. That's it. So, all right. Well, thank you. It's been such a blessing to have you. I'm glad that we had a chance to connect and talk. And thank you for being on World Awakenings.
Oh, I had a great time. Thank you so much for having me.
This has been another episode of World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with host Carl Gruber, a certified Law of Attraction life coach. We welcome you to tune in to each and every episode of World Awakenings as we open your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to the truth of all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how much they play an all-important role in our moment-to-moment daily life. Much love and light to you, my friend, and thank you for tuning into World Awakenings.